Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Thailand and Cambodia agree to an immediate ceasefire, pledging to halt weeks of deadly border clashes from noon local time. A joint statement says the truce covers all weapons and bans attacks on civilians, infrastructure and military targets. Ukrainian capital Kyiv is under a massive Russian attack with explosions heard in the city and air defences in action. The military says multiple missiles are being deployed against the capital. The Russian action takes place just 2 days before Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is due to meet President Donald Trump in the United States. The leaders plan to discuss details of a possible accord to settle the nearly 4-year war. Israel becomes the first country to formally recognise Somaliland as an independent state, with Prime Minister Netanyahu promising cooperation in key sectors. Somalia opposes secession, while President Donald Trump says he does not support US recognition. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio urges restraint and diplomacy as violence in Yemen escalates. He says Washington supports efforts towards a lasting solution while avoiding taking sides between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. French police arrest a man suspected of stabbing 3 women in the Paris metro during year-end festivities. Prosecutors say he is tracked through surveillance footage and his mobile phone before being detained north of the French capital. The UN Secretary-General says attacks on civilians and places of worship are unacceptable and calls for those responsible to be brought to justice. At least 8 worshippers are killed in an explosion at a mosque in predominantly Alawite area of Homs, Syria, claimed by an Islamist group. Argentina's Congress approves the 2026 budget, the first under President Javier Milei, including around $102 billion in spending and projecting 5% growth with 10.1% inflation. The plan forecasts a primary surplus of 1.2% of GDP, marking a return to formal budget approval after 2 years of rollovers. We start this hour in Southeast Asia, and the most pressing news of the hour, Thailand and Cambodia have agreed today to halt weeks of their fiercest border clashes in years. The ceasefire took effect at noon, with both sides agreeing to hold current troop positions. Defence ministers warned that any further reinforcements would raise tensions and hurt long-term peace efforts. The fighting lasted 20 days and included fighter jet sorties, rocket fire and artillery barrages. At least 101 people have been killed and more than 500,000 were displaced on both sides of the border. The violence flared earlier this month after a previous ceasefire brokered with US support in July collapsed. Officials say today's agreement is aimed at restoring stability along the disputed frontier. Let's listen in to what the Cambodian Defence Minister T. Shiha had to say.
ជាចំណុចសំខាន់ដំបូងគឺភាគីទាំងពីរយើងបានឯកភាពគ្នាទៅលើបទឈប់បាញ់បន្ទាន់មួយដែលនឹងចូលជាធរមានចាប់ពីថ្ងៃនេះនៅម៉ោង 12 ថ្ងៃត្រង់ស្របថ្ងៃទី 27 ខែធ្នូឆ្នាំ 2025 នេះតទៅក្រោយពីបទឈប់បាញ់នេះយើងត្រូវបានអនុវត្តឲ្យបានពេញលេញក្នុងរយៈពេល 72 ម៉ោងដែលក្នុងនោះនឹងអាចឲ្យភាគីថៃមានលទ្ធភាពក្នុងការដោះលែងយោធិន 18 កម្ពុជា 18 រូបដែលបានជាប់នៅប្រទេសថៃអស់រយៈពេល 151 ថ្ងៃមកហើយបទជប់បាញ់នេះក៏ស្របទៅតាមស្មារតីនៃសេចក្តីថ្លែងការណ៍នៅទីក្រុងកូឡាឡាំពួរដែលបានចុះហត្ថលេខានៅថ្ងៃទី 26 ខែតុលាឆ្នាំ 2025 នេះដែរគួរសមពីលើនោះអ្វីដែលតាមរយៈនៃបទជប់បាញ់នៅថ្ងៃនេះគឺនឹងបើកផ្លូវឲ្យបងប្អូនប្រជាពលរដ្ឋភៀសសឹកដែលមានលំនៅឋានទៅតាមតំបន់ព្រំដែននេះអាចមានលទ្ធភាពក្នុងការត្រឡប់ទៅរស់នៅនៅលំនៅឋានរបស់ខ្លួនវិញអាចប្រកបមុខរបរក៏ដូចជាធ្វើស្រែចម្ការ
Joining us now is Him Rotha, the Deputy Director at the Cambodian Centre for Regional Studies, joining us from Cambodia right now. Thank you very much for joining us in this discussion on this breaking news. Of course, what do you think has fundamentally pushed Thailand and Cambodia to the brink at this time, despite these earlier ceasefire efforts? What pushed them to announce this ceasefire, agree to something now after, of course, the death of 101 people and over 500,000 displaced from those border regions?
Thank you for having me today.
Pleasure.
I think the current ceasefire is very important at the moment. It's a time that for the war to stop and pave the way for diplomatic restoration. But of course, the negotiation and the fighting has been come up with a very long time. The second round of fighting in December is longer than the previous one, and we cannot deny that this current war, since the first round, it's owing to the complication of domestic politics in both Cambodia and Thailand, but especially in Thailand. And for this second time, we have seen the effort from the various international actors, including ASEAN, the US, and China, try to push the war to stop. But the war, with those external mediation, the war did not stop. But until the bilateral talk in this GBC General Border Committee with the two defense ministers, so the Cambodian and Thai agreed to stop. So this leaves the impression that the Thai military, they want the war to stop at their own terms without any external interference. Yes.
Yeah, and of course we saw that first ceasefire announced with a grand signing ceremony with Donald Trump in attendance in Malaysia. However, this of course wasn't effective. From Phnom Penh's perspective, what broke down in this July-brokered US-backed ceasefire, which led to this escalation, and why is this ceasefire different?
I think it's boiled down to the nature of the agreement, and of course the ongoing conflict itself, because there was a fragile ceasefire agreement, no effective implementation mechanism taking place. So it's boiled down to, you know, the belligerent actors, especially the Thai, they begin to come up with some sort of events, provocative events and accusation, and so when there's no validation or verification, this kind of thing could happen at any moment. So the thing is that the nature of the agreement is fragile to begin with. Yes.
And what's the feeling in Cambodia right now in regards to this situation, especially after the announcement today? Are the people, is there a feeling of relief now this is seemingly on its way to de-escalating, or is there anger there?
It's a relief. It's something that we have wished for a few weeks already. The Cambodian people and the Cambodian society, we don't wish this kind of thing happen. It affects our livelihood and economy, and so with this ceasefire happening, we can breathe again. Yeah. So there's seem to be a space that we could find a way out. And for me personally, I hope that after this ceasefire agreement, there could be a pathway to diplomatic restoration between the two countries, because of course Cambodia and Thailand are neighboring countries, and we cannot live without each other. So I hope there could be a light sometime soon, but I'm not too much optimistic on this normalization, because things still fragile at the moment. Yes.
And finally, of course, the new fighting erupted because, of course, there was landmines throughout this border region, and Cambodia and Thailand previously said that they would work together to demine the area, and then there was an incident where I believe a Thai soldier was injured by a landmine, which then spiraled into what we're seeing today, or previous to this ceasefire. What happens in the next 48 hours that will tell you whether this ceasefire will hold looking forward?
As I mentioned, it's still fragile. It's still fragile at the moment, and I hope the situation on the ground, especially the actors on the ground, the military on both sides, keep a cool head and keep the sincerity of this ceasefire agreement, so that it would allow those displaced people, more than from the Cambodian side, more than 600,000, and from the Thai side, I think hundreds of thousands. So it's almost 1 million displaced people go back to their normal life. I hope both sides would be sincere with each other this time.
Yes, Him Rotha, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX as well. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on and over to East Asia, and China has passed major revisions to its foreign trade law aimed at strengthening its ability to wage trade wars and opening its economy further. The new law, approved by China's top legislative body, will take effect on March the 1st of 2026. The revisions include provisions to counter external challenges and expand China's legal toolkit for responding to trade disputes. It also focuses on areas such as digital and green trade, as well as intellectual property provisions to meet international standards. The law is part of China's effort to reduce its reliance on the US and establish itself as a stronger player in global trade. The revisions also addressed issues around private sector criticism and the regulation of exports, including controls on strategic minerals. Joining us now is Jayjit Bhattacharya. He's an economist and finance expert, joining us live from New Delhi to talk about this further. Thank you very much for joining us. How big of a development is this in regards to China's export policy and, of course, the manufacturing sector in general?
You know, it's been a continuous process. So this particular step that China has just announced is a continuation of what China has already been doing. What has basically happened is that China has given a further legal framework to whatever it was doing in a knee-jerk reaction. If I recollect, in 2010, China stopped all rare earth exports and critical mineral exports to Japan, which brought down the Japanese electronics industry. And I think it was roughly at that time that China started using trade as a mechanism of warfare. And what the current legislation or the policy change that China has adopted essentially provides that particular steps to be taken by the US, a more robust legal framework. Now, if you look at how capacities are demolished in a warfare, essentially, if you look at the Russia-Ukraine warfare, bombs are thrown on the factory so that you cannot manufacture more of whatever is needed for the economy or the military. The other way of reducing capacities is by dumping products of the same type at a significantly lower price. So if you're running a chemical factory of, let's say, producing nitric oxide, China will provide the same thing at a significantly lower price so that your capacity stops. And then subsequently, China increases its prices, as we have seen, for example, in India, where penicillin G was exported by China at 1/4 the price. And once the local capacities got finished off, it jacked up its price. And that's what's been happening in sector after sector. So without dropping a bomb, China has been demolishing the capacities in the rest of the world. And this particular step that has been taken from a regulatory perspective is more of providing a framework for the steps that China wants to take.
Yes.
Also, some of the immediate provocation for this has been France banning the sale of childlike sex toys coming from China. Now, that's a valid concern, and it is against the law of the land in France, and therefore it has banned it. China is treating that as a trade barrier and is treating that as a trade war, which is significantly unfair in the rule of law context.
Yeah, and of course, this law has been passed in order to strengthen China's ability when it comes to waging trade wars. How significant is it that China has now formalized these legal tools to retaliate in these trade disputes? Does this institutionalize trade confrontation?
Absolutely, yes. Again, I think with as we saw a few months back, what China did was again use rare earth alloys and rare earth magnets as a tool to retaliate to specifically US, but also that retaliation went to the rest of the world. If you look at the trade surplus of China, it's over $1 trillion, which is significantly more than most of the economies of the world. It's bigger than 90% of the economies of the world, and that's just the trade surplus. And that's come up through a mechanism which is not really a free open trade mechanism, which is why China is treated as a non-market economy. Now, in that context, what China is essentially trying to do as a next step is weaponize its ability, the fact that it controls most of the global trade. And also it has leverage over specific supplies and specific materials, such as rare earth as an example, which for China is a relatively lower amount in terms of exports. But in terms of the target economies, they shatter multi-trillion-dollar economies. If you control rare earth magnets, you destroy the automotive industry, you destroy the military industry, and so on and so forth, and which is what we have seen. And many economies continue to suffer under that. Germanium tetrachloride, another example, China just stopped providing that. And therefore, those who are manufacturing fiber optic will be forced to stop manufacturing fiber optic and therefore go back to China to buy fiber optic. So by controlling the upstream supplies, China is forcing the rest of the world to buy downstream product from China at whatever price and quality that China decides to provide. So it has significantly already weaponized trade. What these changes have brought in is, again, as I mentioned, a regulatory framework to further justify whatever arbitrary decisions that the government of China wants to take from here onwards, and giving it a regulatory sanctity, which is quite not acceptable in today's day and world.
Yeah, and China has also claimed that it's going to meet international standards on intellectual property and digital trade. Should the world believe that?
Well, by the past record, absolutely not. As any business person would tell you, the moment they go to China to get anything manufactured, the first thing they sacrifice is IPR. We haven't seen anything fundamentally change on the ground in China to believe that there would be a change moving forward. Most of the things that China had committed to has not turned out to be true, either from a military perspective or from a geopolitical perspective or from a geoeconomic perspective. And therefore, moving forward, there is very little credibility that China brings to the table for us to believe that they will respect any form of IPR.
Jayjit Bhattacharya, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you on these issues. We now move over to the Middle East for our next story. And Yemen's Saudi-led coalition has reportedly warned that it will act against any military moves by the STC, or Southern Transitional Council, that threaten to harm civilians or escalate tensions in the province of Hadramawt. The STC, which is backed by the United Arab Emirates, has intensified its push for control in recent weeks. The group has already driven the Saudi-backed internationally recognized Yemeni government from its headquarters, and the STC now also claims broad authority across southern Yemen. The coalition's warning comes as Yemen's government has formally requested increased military support in Hadramawt, which happens to be the country's largest province and a strategically vital region bordering Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Sea. Moreover, officials also report that the STC rejected a Saudi call yesterday, saying it would continue security operations in areas it seized earlier this month, including that region and the neighbouring province of Marah. Next, we turn to Latin America, and Argentina's Congress has approved the 2026 budget, marking the first budget passed by lawmakers since President Javier Milei took office in late 2023. The budget passed 46 votes to 25 with one abstention, including spending of $102 billion, and projects South America's second biggest economy will grow 5% with inflation at 10.1%. The bill projects a primary budget surplus equivalent to 1.2% of the gross domestic product. The 2023 budget was the last one passed by Congress, and during the first 2 years of his term, Milei's government had extended the budget of the previous year without passing a bill in Congress, resulting in sectors being dramatically hit by inflation, which hit an annual rate of almost 300% in April 2024. And while the new budget boosts funding for social services, the bump still does not compensate for sharp falls over the last several years, as per reports. Let's listen into what the ruling party's Senator Patricia Bullrich had to say on this.
Este presupuesto lo que hace es expresar el rumbo económico que eligió la sociedad argentina, eligiendo al presidente Milei. Pero este, sobre todo, señora Presidente, es un presupuesto que no improvisa, no engaña, no pongamos un numerito más total, después no lo cubrimos, subejecutamos. No promete lo que no se puede cumplir, no le miente a la gente.
We move on over to the United States next. And New York Governor Kathy Hochul declared a state of emergency on Friday ahead of Winter Storm Devin. The National Weather Service warns the storm will create hazardous travel from the Great Lakes to southern New England. Heavy snow of 5 to 8 inches is expected in parts of the region, while western Pennsylvania could see ice storms. Authorities are urging residents to stay off roads and prepare for disruptions to travel and power. We move on to our final story, and Nvidia has struck a major deal with AI startup Grok. The chipmaker will license Grok's technology and hire its CEO, Jonathan Ross, a former Google AI veteran. Grok specializes in interference, helping trained AI models respond quickly to user requests. Nvidia dominates AI training, but faces stiff competition in interference from rivals like AMD and other startups. The deal is non-exclusive, meaning Grok will remain independent under CEO Simon Edwards, with its cloud business continuing. Financial details were not disclosed, however, though reports suggested a $20 billion valuation. Analysts warn antitrust concerns could arise, even as Nvidia gains Grok's leadership and technical talent. This move follows a trend where tech giants acquire talent and tech without full company takeovers. Joining us now is Somraj Bhattacharjee, an AI and market strategic expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. What more can you tell us about this story coming out of the world of artificial intelligence? And of course, Nvidia, a huge company when it comes to chip making, etc. Can you put it in simpler terms for us?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure.
So what's going to happen is that LPU technology, LPU architecture, which is basically language processing unit architecture, is going to see a huge change. Now, to make it simple for the audience to understand, what happens is most of the architecture that we use in our day-to-day AI interactions with bots are LLMs. But LPU are basically ultra-low latency, high throughput inference engines, which can convert any kind of basic inputs into advanced. technology that Grok specializes in. Now, because of this very unique niche expertise that they have, Nvidia, which already is one of the largest, if not the largest, chip manufacturers in the world, they have immense technology expertise in GPU. This will increase the command and hold of Nvidia in the market, number one. And number two, Nvidia's access to data centers is going to be immense, which will make Nvidia the largest player in data storage in the world, which is going to be long-term and which is going to have extremely positive financial ramifications for Nvidia. So that's what's going to be laid out. The financial details, it's 20 billion, that's what's being given in the market, but we still don't know for sure. But technology-wise, this is going to really make Nvidia the largest data processing center in the world.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Somraj Bhattacharjee. That is all that we have time for, though, unfortunately, this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.